Hello, I'm just going to walk you through our electronic flow monitoring worksheet and parts list generator. So this is just where you download it off the website. Within the download section, click it, it'll download. Alright, once you're in the worksheet itself, you'll have to enable editing because again it came from the website. Some security settings might change a little bit there too. There is one page for instructions. Feel free to read it and such. It has good information as far as what's required, what's optional, and why. But the main thing that you're going to be doing is starting here. So on the right here, we'll see a few little buttons that we can flip and flop between different pages. So if we need to go back to instructions, it's an option. Since we're always going to be starting at the first product, we'll hit product 1 setup. And what you'll end up seeing is there's a product 2 and product 3. So in this kind of webinar session, we're not going to go into product 2 and product 3 because we're assuming kind of a simpler setup. The main thing though is that you're aware of it's pretty well the same information. And the reason we ask it is because in some circumstances we're going to be able to share components, electronic components, wiring, and those kind of things between the products. So it is an option for later on. But again, this setup we'll do a single product. And then below that, we're going to see a few buttons. So the central install parts list. So each of these buttons is going to be a different way to install the system. So the system itself, if we're talking centrally installing it, that means all the electronics, all the manifolds, and all those kind of bits are going to be right towards kind of the center of the drill, or the air drill, or the planter and such. So what it'll end up being is that you might have your controller right near the center of the drill. You'd have your node 1, 2, 3, and 4, and carry on however many nodes you might have, all towards the middle. The main difference, though, compared to the next one, which I'd call the remote section, is that you're not having to split or extend harnesses between nodes down the length of the planter or the drill. So on the equipment, if you're doing a remote section, that means we're remotely having each section fed to each manifold or sensors or those kind of things, being a very different way to plumb it. Because of the differences, we will have extra parts. So as far as cost, again, there'd be a little bit more higher extension harnesses and such like that. But also too, it can mean sometimes that instead of having 3 nodes perfectly used, efficiently, it might mean, hey, you might need a 4th one because you're not able to stretch wire, that they're on the low quad sensor cables. You might need an extra node. So again, cost effectiveness, central install is generally the best. You'd have less extensions and harnesses and length of wire down the length of your implement. Remote section is good if you already have pre-existing sections and manifolds already there. If you are kind of plumbing it into an existing manifold, there's 2 other options here too. So there's inline flow meter. So that's equivalent of saying, hey, I've already got a plumbing manifold, or let's say kind of equivalent to a spur boom. So we have a length of tube that has nozzle bodies and check valves every, let's say, 10 inches or whatever the case. I'm not looking to replace all my manifolds because they work and they're there. Cool. You can end up having it as an inline flow meter as well by just having that inlet hose barb or push and tube size through the flow meter and then to the outside. So again, just like an inline flow meter. So you'd have one of those for each individual row. It would just be strode out a little bit differently down the length of the planter or the drill. For more complex setups, sometimes it is more cost effective to replace the tubing with kind of compact manifolds. But again, the easy thing is these are all generated as soon as you put in information in that product 1 setup page and such. The last one is the EFM add-on. So let's say you already have an existing flow indicator, a Wilger flow indicator or Wilger parts. So let's say we have everything but the flow meter. So we can actually just price it out as just an add-on. So pull a U-clip here, take the outlet off, put that flow meter in, reattach it, and away you go. And plug in the electronics and away you go. So that's the main buttons at the bottom here. So again, same function, but same function of the system itself, but a little bit different in the plumbing of the parts that are required. So before you have all the information selected and those kind of things, nothing will populate here. That's normal. Once we insert and include the product 1 setup page and information, that's where it starts populating. Note, there is a currency selection here. So whether you're, again, in the Canadian area, if you're getting Canadian dollar pricing, cool. Otherwise, in the US or internationally, it's likely using US dollar. These discount for electronics, that's more for the dealers themselves, whether they're getting a discount on certain electronics or whatever the case. But again, they are there for the dealer to use, or for yourself if you do get a discount from your dealer. So back to the beginning. So I hit the product 1 button. So product 1 setup page. So what we're going to end up doing, we'll just kind of do a quick overview and then we'll fill it out quick. So the main thing is, generally, this orange button means you have some means to change the information. So again, inserting or selecting something. What we'll generally see is if we put in, for an example, I'm just put a number here. If there's a field that can take multiple different means of selections to get to the same end, like for an example, I put in 1.5 US gallons per minute, we do not need to fill in the rest of these red ones. If that makes sense. So just pick what makes sense, or pick what you know. So that might be the equivalent of saying, hey, I know I need 5 gallons an acre, but to compute your flow, you still need to have your speed. So with 5 gallons an acre at 5 miles an hour, and the nozzle spacing, it would be able to compute your flow. So again, yellow means insert something there, if you could. At the very beginning, again, for simplicity, we'll start at the very top of the page. We can put in a product name. Again, the name doesn't do anything other than just being a label. So again, starter. The name does make it easier later on if you did have multiple products, just so that you can tell what product or what application is using which parts, on the actual code sheet. Here is the product density. So again, please enter one valid product density. So whether you know your product density, whether it's a fertilizer in kilograms per liter or in product density in pounds per US gallon. Again, there's some common layouts here, or if you know the specific gravity. Again, for our example, let's say we're using a starter fertilizer that's just a little bit denser than 2800. So we plug that in, instantly you see those other fields go red, because again, we don't need them anymore. We've got the information we need. For the number of outlets, so this is how many outlets are on the planter itself. So if you had a 12-row planter, you'd have 12 rows. Simple as that. If you had a 60-row air drill, it'd be 60 rows. Simple enough. If you did anything as far as multiple products and that kind of stuff, even though it's still a 60-row air drill with 2 products, let's say, we would still put in 60 rows. Because again, your product 2 page is going to look after your additional 60 rows of whatever your product 2 is. For the number of manifolds, this is important just so that the spreadsheet can actually kind of anticipate the layout of your air drill. Because again, depending on how much room is in between sections and those kind of things, does make an impact in how efficiently we can use the sensor cables and such. So in this situation, let's say we're using 5 sections. So on the implement itself, we're section 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. For the outlet spacing, whether we're doing centimeters or inches, let's say we're on 12-inch spacing on this air drill. So 12-inch spacing, and then we'll plug in our primary flow rate. So the primary flow rate for starter, again, starter just being that name that we plugged in there. So let's say we're doing 5 gallons an acre, and lo and behold, everything goes red except for the one that we do need. So we need to enter our speed, otherwise it can't anticipate the flow rate. So we'll say 5 miles an hour. Again, no big deal if you're using liters per hectare. Again, you just need your speed in kilometers per hour. And same thing. If you do know the US gallons per minute that's being applied or required for each individual row, you can put that in there too, and it just saves you putting in your speed. But, all right, to the next section here, we see the outlets, because again, we do need to know, you know what, while I go ahead, I'm going to zoom in a little bit there. We do need to know what type of outlet fitting. So again, whether first we'd select our outlet fitting type, so whether it's a hose barb or a pushing tube or a quick connect or those kind of things that you'd put in, a 1/4 inch outside diameter hose or tube and shove it in and it locks. Or there's female threaded port, so whether it's a 1/4 inch 1/4 inch threaded fitting or whatever the case. There's a square lug outlet as well. So that'd be like a T-jet outlet, for an example, if you're using a square lug cap or the T-jet or whatever the case for your metering cap, you can do that too. Or just in case you already have the outlets, for example, we can put no outlets required. In our situation, where again, knowing we are in starter, we're going to be using a 1/4 inch OD push tube. Yep, so do push tube. Then we'd select our outlet orientation. So depending on what you plugged in here for the fitting type, it'll automatically change to the available options for you. So we either have a straight push and tube fitting or 90 degree. To which I'll do 90 degree. It'll work a little bit better for what I want. Then we'd select the outlet fitting size. So again, these are the options available to you in that size. Since I know it's 1/4 inch, I'd select automatically. It's computed that, hey, what you're looking for is this part number. This is only just for confirmation in case you want to take a look at the pictures, those kind of things. We don't need to keep tabs on this part number. It'll automatically get into the parts list. The next option is a metering orifice required? So if you had an existing metering orifice that you're using, or you already have in line somewhere, or whatever the case, simply say no. If you were looking for the Wilger ORS, so rig seal metering orifices that would snug straight into that push and tube gap, we'd select yes. So that's what we'll do. Scroll down, and now we're into the inlet selection. So just like the outlets, we need to quantify what kind of outlet size and fitting and that kind of stuff we need. We need to know also what size, whether it be a hose bar, let's say, we need going into the manifolds. So this would be coming from the pump or from the strainer after the pump. We'd say, I want a hose barb, I want a 90 degree, let's say. And let's say I'm using a 3/4 inch hose feeding from the pump to the manifold. Simple enough. And automatically you get that part number again. The next question is, are those manifolds center fed with a T? Are you intending to have a T bridging, splitting up a manifold? So if we had, let's say in our situation, we're going to have imperfect manifold outlets, and we're going to say, yes, we do want a T in between those, each manifold, we'll say yes. We can also say whether we want it as a side-fed manifold. Usually, if our manifolds are any bigger than 12, it would be recommended to have a center-fed T. For smaller manifolds, so let's say if you only had 6 flow indicators or flow meters, I should say, in one manifold, you could probably just do side-fed and no big deal. But some people, they do like the center-fed T because there's a little 1/4 inch port that you can drill out and install a check valve or a pressure gauge as well. So again, center-fed manifold is what we'll do this one. There's also inline flow meter, only. So again, we don't need a T because it already exists. The manifold exists, or there's already existing plumbing and you don't require any manifolds too. So in our case, we'll do center-fed manifold. We do have the option to put an alternate flow rate. So again, this is more if you had a fairly different flow rate on that same manifold that you might just need a different metering orifice for. Or if you were saying, hey, you know what, some of my applications might be doing 5.5 gallons an acre instead of 5 miles an hour, or at 5 miles an hour. And we'll do that just so we can see in our metering orifice selection whether there's one metering orifice that's better for that flow range. So hopefully I haven't lost you so far. We've kind of gone through just the parts, setting it up. If you scroll down, here's the implement layout of sections for our starter, so our product 1. This is where, because of the multitude of different variables or variability in how we set up the planter or the existing planter or drill, we do need to plug in what our sections are sized like. So again, we said we kind of confirmed there's 5 sections, but we have to determine or kind of write out how they're split up. So let's say, for example, we're going to do, there's 8 outlets on our outside wings. And let's say there's 12 outlets on our secondary. And then on our primary, let's say there's 20, for an example. So again, section 1 has 8 outlets. Section 2 has 12 outlets. Our middle section has 20. And then it goes to 12 to 8. Again, these numbers can be whatever your actual air drill or planter are laid out like. Whether it's one section altogether, no individual shutoffs or anything like that, or up to the 13 sections. So the main thing though is that we're getting the same number in this total product as we are what should be on the air drill or planter. If you scroll down, there's a little bit here just for diagnostics. So again, just verifying, do the product runs match the section layout? True, because again, naturally 60 and 60, we made sure that we didn't make a mistake. So there's also diagnostics for how many nodes would be used if we selected that option for central electronic or central manifold. So all the electronics towards the center of the drill, we're using 4. If we did split sections, so if you remember, that's sometimes where you get a little bit less effective use of harnesses and such. Sometimes that might require more sections out, or more nodes out split on the wings. You might have an extra node that you don't need otherwise. And then just for an estimate for the extended harnesses, if we did split sections as well. So these are more if you're playing around with replumbing the system or whatever the case, if it did make sense to. You can kind of mess around there too. But again, for the most part, the main thing you're looking at, you want to make sure that the total runs of product that you put in each section matches what's on the drill. If we scroll down, now we can pick the metering orifices. So in our situation, we had plugged in a rate 1, which was 5 gallons a minute, or 5 gallons per acre at 5 miles an hour. And then we had an alternate rate 2, which just by coincidence rounded the same way, at 5.5 gallons at 5 miles an hour. So what it means is these color-coded metering orifices can be used. If we selected this black one, which is quite small, for our nominal rate, it'd be starting at 52 psi, and then for our secondary rate, we'd be up to 63 psi, which is generally higher than we'd want it to be, especially when there's a better alternative. Option number 2 is this pink one at 29 psi, not too bad for your typical rate, and up to 35 psi for your higher rate. So all in all, I'd probably say that's going to be your best option. By default, the check valves are going to be a 10 psi check valve. So if you're picking a nozzle or metering orifice sound that is nearer to 10 psi, usually 12 psi is a kind of what I'd call, the minimum safe zone, because again, there might be a little bit of variability in pressure pump or pressure from the pump and such. Generally, if you were going to be operating with a metering orifice that's going to be more, 10 psi on the nose or a little bit lower, I would make sure when we get to the parts list that we're ordering the 4 psi check valves. By standard, the check valves are kind of the 10 psi check valve. If you're operating or knowingly going to be operating low pressure, make sure you get the low pressure check valve. No difference in cost. If you scroll down, here's the metering orifice selection, and then we just select the metering orifice. So in our situation, one metering orifice is going to do both. If you had an alternate or whatever the case, you can select the second one, but again, everything's good with that one. So the part numbers here, we just select it. So if we scroll back up, we've done everything we needed to do. If we had a second product, what we can end up doing, we can say, hey, here's our second product, and this is, let's say it's a straight 28% or 20 UAM, and fill out the same information. But again, like I said, in this one, we'll skip. So we're only in product 1, and now we have the decision to make. Or maybe you've already made the decision how you're going to be plumbing the system. So to start, we're going to be selecting the central install. So what ended up happening, so in here, let's say, we're happy to do US dollars. For each system with this layout, we would need one ECU, part numbers here, and descriptions here. Again, the ECU base kit includes a 20-foot battery harness, the ECU itself, the antenna, and as well as a terminator cap. The terminator cap always goes on the last node in series. So whatever the last one is, we need it capped off, both for safety, security, and all that kind of stuff, but also too, it loops back the signal back to the ECU. And then the EFM app, again, it's listed here just more as a reminder. Download it, but also too, we don't include the tablet itself, just because again, it just becomes a lot more expensive tablet, whereas many Android tablets work. So generally source it through your dealer or locally. And then here we have 4 of these part number 20621-00. So that's a 16 channel node kit. So again, you'd get one for each up to 16 sensors or rows of product that you're monitoring. And each of those include the node being kind of that product node, the harness, that little spider wire that connects from and to that node, as well as 4 quad sensor cables. Those are going to be your actual sensors, your eyes on the flow meter. So simply enough, you'd have that. And then often there will be extra parts. So there might be a node cover cap if one bank of 4 is not being required, which is the case for us. There might be other parts for individual caps, for sensors that aren't being used and those kind of things there too. In which case they might populate saying exactly what's there. So again, blank is just meaning we didn't need that part for this kit. If we scroll down, we see the plumbing components. So again, these are more kind of the plastic parts, if that makes sense. So in our situation, we need 10 end caps. So the end caps themselves, they would go on each end of the manifold. Since we're using a center-fed manifold from the pump itself, it'll go up into the center manifold, split out left and right, and those end caps are going at the end. So again, that's why we need 10 of them, because we have 5 manifolds and 2 on each side. For the manifolds themselves, because of how we laid out our sections, in 8s and 4s or 8s and 12s and 20, everything's divisible by 4. So if we by chance had, let's say for an example, one outlet, or let's say our outside wing only had 7 outlets, and our primary on the left side had 13 outlets. So a little different, same numbers. If we go back to that central manifold, what you'll end up seeing is that the manifolds changed. So instead of being able to rely on only 4 outlet manifolds, which include the flow meter kits, the check valve, and the actual manifold itself, it changed. So now we need 14 4 outlets, and we need 1 3 outlet and 1 singleton, 1 outlet. So it automatically changed that. So again, that's why it is important that this information in that implement layout is important to be accurate, because it just saves you ordering the wrong parts or having to change stuff around. So yep. So carrying on, you see some blanks here too. That just means we didn't need those parts. For the center fed T, again, 20526-00, we need 5 of them because again we have 5 manifolds that we've told our center fed. If you scroll down, now we'll have the parts specific to the starter, or product 1. We need 60 outlets. So again, those 1/4 inch pushing tubes, the part number already populated and ready to go. We'd need 5 inlets, so the 3/4 inch hose barb, 90 degrees. We need 5 O-ring seal strainers. So these are an inline strainer, totally optional. Again, whether you have better or larger strainers or whatever the case. These are just so if you wanted one directly above or in front of each manifold, you can do that. And then you need 60 meter orifices with the part number that we've already selected in there. So scroll down, there's other options to add extra parts. So again, that would be add the quantity part number, and the rest kind of is sorted out for you. So that'd be more if we're needing more medium orifices or something like that. We can do that there. And then there's the cost. So again, this pricing is based on today, 2024. Generally, it'll have that information there too, or should. Yeah. So that's so the parts list in that situation, again, fairly simple, because again, we're using the most efficient use of harnesses and those kind of things with the requirement of our implement's layout. If we click one of these other buttons, so the remote section, again, remembering this is the manifolds and the nodes split up down the length of the spur or air drill or planter. We'd still need 1 base kit. We need 1, or a few node kits, cover caps, some extension cables, and quad sensor extension cables. So those would be ones that go from between the node harness to the quad sensor. So again, more splitting things up further down the planter and such like that, because we'd probably have to go from 8 outlets out here, but then we'd have 2 extra quad sensor cables kicking around, so we'd send them to the inward or secondary section, and so on. So and then we might send one onward to the center. So again, that's what those are for. And then we need 1 ECU splitter kit. So the Y adapter cable, or the splitter, goes immediately after the ECU and splits those nodes going left and right. So that splitter kit comes with that Y adapter cable, as well as 1 additional terminator. because again, that terminator is needed to send the numbers or send all the sensors back from both sides. The rest of the plumbing would probably be very similar to the other one. Again, same end caps, manifolds, center pin tees, metering orifices, and such like that. In the additional parts here, it would be more important to make sure that you do have additional extension cables or lengths in case you do have more room in between where those nodes are going. Again, the assumption is the 12-foot cable is going to be enough to get from one node or one section to the next. But again, you know better than the computer. So if you need an additional length or extras in between, definitely order that there too. So again, you can just type in those part numbers and such there too. It is fairly handy to have the catalog right beside you too, just to make sure if there were any other additional parts you might need. For an example, you can actually swap out one of the end caps and change it to a pushing tube, like a 1/4 inch pushing tube out. So it's an end cap with a 1/4 inch pushing tube for the purpose of having a 1/4 inch line that feeds to a remote pressure gauge. That might be closer to the implement, so you have a pressure gauge visual right at the manifold, at the manifold level. And yeah, so there's a lot of different parts that we manufacture that can be useful, but this is just kind of the basic. So the other ones, just to give a quick glance, these are generally less common, but let's say if we had an inline flow meter, again, remember we already have a manifold or a sprayer boom or something like that splits up our flow, and then it's just a matter of mating up these flow meters inline along the way and then hooking up the electronics. There would be more cost to this setup because you'll notice we might need longer sensor cables because there's more length and distance between each individual sensor. With our normal sensor cables, we have about let's say a foot in between. But again, since these are going to be probably 10 inches apart and such like that, it adds up. So there might be extra features like that or extension cables. And then since we don't need the manifolds anymore because they're already existing, elsewhere, we just need the flow meter. And then there would just be different kind of part numbers for the ins and the outs and such like that too. So that would be there. And then for the flow meter add-on, again, a little bit simpler. We just need the flow meters and the electronics. Again, there's the optional check valves if you didn't already have one, and the metering orifices, because again, those might have not been existing yet. You might not have had those. Yeah. So again, all the prices are there. All the parts lists are there. It's just a matter of making sure that any additional parts or extra parts, sometimes it might be handy to have a few parts on hand. So for an example, one of 20585, that's the quad sensor cable. Just in case there's, something gets crimped or broken or a sensor or whatever the case, those are happy to have on hand. The flow meter body kit as well is a 20580-00. Again, that one is actually the flow meter body itself. So it comes with the extra jets and such like that. But useful in case something gets broken or smacked or damaged or something like that. The rest of the parts are pretty common. They're not going to be breaking. Or you could have a few extra metering orifices as well. Again, the metering orifice is just more for if something gets plugged or whatever the case. It's often easier just to plug in a new one, take the compromised one, and just clean it and put it back into stock. So that is pretty much it. So again, a lot of things going on in the background, a lot of ways to configure it, but this tool is intended to make it a little bit easier, so that even if you have the most complicated setup where you have 3 different products with different number of runs, whether you had mid-row banders or whatever the case, and it can kind of summarize it all in one go. All right, well, hopefully that helps. If worst case, again, we're very easy to reach. If you do have questions, either through the website or on a number of forums and such like that, or emailing us direct to the factory here. Thanks much. Bye-bye.